I'm Gordon McKell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. Learn more at filmmakeru.com, and you can also follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u, and on Filmmaker U's YouTube channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and check off the notification bell to see videos weekly. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC. For more information on how they can assist your filmmaking needs, go to owcdigital.com. This week, I'm joined by camera operator and educator, Scott Ressler, whose work includes Barton Fink, Austin Powers, and a personal favorite of mine, who's Harry Crumb. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thank you.
As I said, my personal favorite is Who's Harry Crumb, because I feel like it should have been a more popular show or movie. What was it like to work on that set? Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. I didn't do the entire film. I did the pickups in Los Angeles, which was, I think, 4 weeks in two-week blocks. And John Candy was just a joy. I mean, he knew everyone's name. He entertained people between setups. It was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had.
Really? So when you're, in terms of your role is, because you've done, like I said, you've done camera assisting and you've also done camera operating. What is something that you learned through your career? Because you've worked on some amazing films, as I mentioned at the start here, that you would tell your students, because you're an instructor as well.
I mean, are you talking about experiences? Or?
Yeah, I'm thinking there's things that we can teach in the classroom,
wow.
But it's until you get onto the set, you're not going to know, a little trick here, a little thing here.
Of course. I mean, most of it has to do with attitude. I would say that as long as, make sure you're good to everyone, because you never know who's going to be your boss. And also, it's just the right thing to do. But I would say probably my best feature for success is persistence. I mean, just don't give up too easily. You may have a time when you're on a difficult production, or one that you're not suited for, or maybe you're not ready for the position you're in, but that doesn't mean you won't be. So just don't give up.
Now, you've also worked with Roger Deakins. Can you give me a sense of what that experience was like?
Sure. I first worked with him on Barton Fink, and I had an interesting interview. I was the last person he saw. I came in on a weekend because I had been working during the week, and I thought I didn't have a chance at all to get on the show, even though he wasn't world famous quite yet. He'd already shot Sid and Nancy in 1984, which were two films that blew me away. And so I came in, just had a great attitude because I thought I'm going to get to meet this person and, spend some time being interviewed. And I just happened to mention one of my favorite films that turned out to be his favorite film, and that's why I got the job, and that was In Cold Blood, just a beautiful film. And so on a fluke, I was hired. And he's very personable. He understands limitations of technology, and he understands what's difficult and what isn't. So for me, it was actually sort of an epiphany. He works in a different way than anyone else I had worked with. And it was a way that, at least in some ways, I connected with. So we got along very well. I was, at the time, he had regular people in New York, so I was just, had the opportunity to work with him in Los Angeles. But then many years later, we reconnected, and I had a nice long run with him, working for him as an operator.
Now, you said that he works in a different way than anyone else. What's different about his approach?
I wouldn't say anyone else, just anyone else I had the chance to work with to that point. But he just, the way he looks at lighting is different. I would say he approaches everything the same way, which is kind of the way I look at things, rather than saying, oh, this is a big setup, now let me go into my big setup mode and set up a giant light here and a giant light here. He just approaches everything um, almost like whatever his lighting scheme is for a small setup, sometimes often applies for a large setup as well. It's just it's almost difficult to put into words, but I've never seen anyone light a large setup like he does. Sometimes he'll light a huge room with a giant cluster of regular light bulbs. It's really unusual and interesting to watch.
Interesting. Now, like I said, you've had this long career. What are some of the challenges you didn't realize were in the industry, or that you would experience that young camera operators should know about?
Okay. Well, I would say that one thing that people don't warn you about as a camera operator is that you get thrown in head first, into the deep end. And that same is true for focus pullers as well. People won't really tell you anything. If you're lucky enough to have a mentor as a camera operator, then you should be golden. But whenever I had found myself in a position where I didn't know how to do anything, when I'd ask for advice, people would say, you'll figure it out. So that's really tough. So I would say, prepare yourself as well as you can. Go into rental houses and practice on the wheels and practice on fluid heads and follow people around. When people drop out of sight, see what the best way to handle that is. There are going to be times where you let people play the frame or you follow them closely. There's other times where they're moving too fast to actually follow tightly. So you stay calm and you slowly follow them the best you can. And as long as you don't panic, things will be fine. But those things, a lot of those things you're just going to have to figure out for yourself.
Now, is there a scene or a particular shot that you're most proud of from your career?
I would say as a focus puller, the scene that I'm most proud of is probably in Barton Fink. And there were several in that show that were just really difficult. But the one that I think that everyone warned me that this would be the hardest shot of the show, and it was the knob on the top of a bedpost falling off and then rolling right up to the front of the camera. And I think I got almost every take of that. So I just felt like, I was in the groove that day. And so, but also we had a shot where the camera tracked the room and then went up and down into the drain of a sink. And that was a really difficult one that we got several really strong takes. As an operator, nothing really comes to mind right now, but I think operating is a really great position. And a lot of times people, once they become operators, stay there. They never move on. They just enjoy it so much. But it's very challenging. You have to have athleticism. You have to have quick response. And you have to have a sense of composition. And so I would say operating almost every day is a challenge. And so a good production with interesting compositions, I'm just always proud of working on.
So how do you like to, I guess, not only develop your sense of composition, but sort of push it? Do you go through photography books? Do you go through art galleries? Is there a particular artist that you follow?
I would say that I don't have any one particular artist that is my inspiration, but I've always been a fan of art. I've gone to museums my whole life. I had parents who were into art, so I was lucky in that respect. But I would recommend that people follow photographers either on Instagram or just do a search for great photographers and new photographers on Google, and you'll find some amazing work with some beautiful light. There's just so many great street photographers and war photographers and photojournalists and so forth. As far as painting goes, obviously, you should be familiar with Rembrandt and Caravaggio, but there are modern painters who make use of light. There's even painters that fall into sort of the custom culture camp that do almost photographic work. So it's worth pursuing all of that. There's so much to inspire, and I always try to create a fairly dense lookbook at the beginning of every new project, particularly things where I'm the director of photography, so that we have common ground that the director and I can look through and find things that inspire us both and that we both feel are suitable for the project.
And what, because you talked about doing some DP work. So what's something that you learned as a camera operator or an assistant that you've taken to your DP work?
I do think that everyone who's a director of photography should be a camera assistant and an operator at some point, particularly an operator. As far as camera assisting, I've worked with directors of photography who just don't know the limitations and potentials of making use of shallow focus or deep focus. And so I think that's an important lesson to learn. So try to do it at least several times before you become a director of photography, for those of you who are working your way up. But also know that it's helpful to know when you're putting your staff, your camera assistant, your operator into an impossible situation. So the more experienced a director of photography is in those positions, the better they'll work with their crew. I would say as an operator, if you haven't worked as an operator and you're a director of photography, then listen to your operator, because they're going to bring, especially an experienced one, they're going to bring a lot to your visual vocabulary. It's just, you learn so much as far as the aesthetics go, especially when you're working for other people who have a different aesthetic than you do. You'll learn things that you would have never figured out on your own. So it's really important, I think, to get those experiences before you become a cinematographer full-time.
And how do you get on the same page as a director when you're a cinematographer? Like, what's your approach to understanding their vision? Because a lot of times some people aren't able to communicate well what they want, and you want to make sure you give them what they want.
Right. Well, it's incumbent on you to keep the line of communication open. So if you have a director that's not very communicative or doesn't really know what they want at first, then it's best to, I would say, ask constant questions, unless that's not, that the director isn't open to that. So I try to, I'll present something. If I'm not getting the feedback I need to sort of second guess them at first, then I'll present something. I'll push for a testing day so that at least we have the chance to try things and the director has a chance to say yes or no. If you can't do a testing day, then on set, I'll pitch something before we do the setup, or even before the day starts, and see how they feel about it. I mean, there's times when even that doesn't work, but for the most part, don't give up. Don't just assume. Keep trying to get into their head and find out what they want. A lot of times, they're just assuming you're going to come up with that look, and then if they're not happy with it, then it's your fault. So you really have to work and try to find out what their taste is like.
And now you've worked with a lot of well-known directors. Is there something you've learned from all these directors that you take with you in your career?
Yeah, there's a lot I've learned from the various directors. A lot of it, much of it happens outside of my vision. A lot in pre-production with directors, or they pull an actor aside, and I would love to have my ear to that conversation. But one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard, I was shooting parts of a documentary for the DGA many years ago, and Penny Marshall was one of the subjects. And she's someone who, when you first start listening to her, you don't know exactly what she's getting to, and then she loops everything around in a very dramatic way, and then kind of catches you by surprise. And she told a long story about, I think it started with her advice being wear comfortable shoes. And the way she explained it, actually was really deep and moving. But the crux of it was that when she did Big, she worked with, oh, I'm forgetting his name, but a very big producer director, James Brooks, maybe, I believe it was James Brooks, and they had a scene where they were still writing even though they were shooting, and there was a scene where the young man who had just become moved. If you don't know the story, it's about a young boy who wishes he was an adult and suddenly he's an adult. So he goes into the city, and it's his first night in staying in the city, and the writer didn't know how to write that scene. And so James Brooks made the writer, they booked him a room in a really seedy downtown LA. They made him stay there. And then when he woke up in the morning and came into work, James Brooks said, "So what did you learn?" And he said, "I was scared to death." And he said, "Then write that." And I think there's something to be said, even in a stylized production, of looking for what's real, you know. And I think that's true of cinematography as well. But I think most directors I've worked with, certainly most great ones, find a seed of reality and root everything in that, and then you can get away with murder from then on.
Now, you've also, and this is just another sort of thing I'm interested in, you also worked on Thriller earlier in your career. Can you tell us about that? What is that like? Because it seems like it was such a crazy phenomenon, and I guess music video / film.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it had a $7 million budget back then, which would have been, I don't know, 20 million now. I got a call from a friend who was interested in makeup effects, and I was at the time, I was in college, and he had been the PA, the production assistant for the model shop, or for the makeup effects shop, and he got moved up. They needed more people, so he called me, and I became the production assistant. So most of the time I was just driving around. It was a month of work, and it was 6 days a week, and the days were, I think it was 90-hour weeks. Wow. And just a lot of work. And I got to do some things, rough out shapes and on sculptures. And I remember the whiskers on his cat monster. I had to sand the tips of those into a point and things like that. But and Michael Jackson would come in and say oddball things as he was fitted for different parts, and he's very, very nice. And I was just sort of in awe of everyone because there were so many talented people. And then we got to the shoot, and they decided to go union, so I wasn't able to work on it. They could only use union makeup people. But they let us be sort of PA helpers at first, and then suddenly we were all extras. And so I got to be a background, non-dancing background zombie. So of course I picked the most garish, ridiculous mask I could, because I knew that in the wide shots I could spot myself and say, there I am. So if you see it, I'm the furry neon green zombie in the background.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
Vest on too. So.
Wow. Now I have one last question that I like to ask everyone I interview, and that's, what's your favorite guilty pleasure film to watch?
Oh boy, there's so many. I'm a fan of, with a group of people, I love to watch just terrible B movies, and one of them is this really obscure Italian movie called Wild Wild Planet. So that's the one that came to mind when you asked that. I mean, there are a lot of purely entertaining movies that I love, including even Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever. So,
what's Wild Wild Planet about?
Oh, it's just the worst. I mean, it's just laughable and weird and unpredictable. I think it's part of a quadrilogy, a 4-part series, and it's this Italian director who also had an American name. I'm forgetting what it is. Anthony something, and he also made bad movies that were released as if they were American films. But it's your classic spacesuits with bubble helmets and piping on the sleeves, and all, cigar-shaped ships, and you can tell all the models are models. And, I think there's a series of bald four-armed men who shrink people down and put them in little cases or some sort of weird, business. So it's just a really wacky, over-the-top film that's fun to watch.
That's it for this week. Make sure to check out our videos on filmmakeru.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. And on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click on the notification bell to be notified of our weekly videos. I want to thank our guests for joining us this week. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.